You're listening to Love Advice with Leanne. Caller, you're on the air.
Hi, Leanne. Long-time listener, first-time caller. Why, in your professional opinion, do you never take my calls off the air?
Is this Carl?
Yep, it's Carl. I mean, we had a few dates. Everything was great. I thought,
Well, you know, when you switch to Geico, you could save a lot of money on car insurance.
Okay, awesome.
You should call them.
I will.
Geico, because saving 15% or more on car insurance is always a great answer.
Blog Talk Radio. Welcome to Nonprofit U, a forum where nonprofit stakeholders can share lessons learned and discuss the latest developments in the industry. My name is Valerie, Leonard, your host. I'm a consultant to nonprofits, and I specialize in community and organizational development. I work with nonprofit organizations to help them make a stronger impact to their clients and communities. You can find Nonprofit U on Facebook and Twitter. I encourage you to follow us and to comment early and often using the hashtags NonprofitU, Institute for Work in the Economy, and that's the numeral 4, or the Many Futures of Work. You can also leave comments on blogtalkradio.com/nonprofit_U. The chat room is not up right now, but you can post comments and leave questions on the Facebook page, and the Facebook page is Nonprofit U. In order to comment on the Facebook page, you do have to like the page. We hope to have the chat room up and running next week. You can also email me questions at consulting@valeriefleonard.com. You can questions by phone and from our chat room at about the 30-minute mark or so. The call-in number is 347-884-8121. Again, that number is area code 347-884-8121. Today's topic is the many futures of work. We'll talk about the work of the Institute for Work in the Economy and their upcoming participatory conference. Again, we encourage you to start formulating your questions and call in at about the 30-minute mark. Again, our chat room is experiencing a little technical difficulty, but you can start emailing questions at consulting@valeriefleonard.com. You can also post comments and questions on the Facebook page, but in order to post, you have to like the Facebook page. The Facebook page is Nonprofit U. The call-in number is 347-884-8121. Nonprofit and community development professionals, especially those who work with workforce development, are especially encouraged to call in. If you work with policy matters, you're also encouraged to call in as well. Please share your stories and your strategies and add to the conversation. Today is September 11th, and I'd like for us to take a brief moment of silence in remembrance of survivors of 9/11, as well as those who made the ultimate sacrifice. Remember September 11, 2001, at 8:46 a.m., American Airlines Flight number 11 crashed into the World Trade Center. At 9:03 a.m., the United Airlines Flight number 175 crashed into the World Trade Center South Tower. At 9:37 a.m., the American Airlines Flight number 77 crashed into the U.S. Pentagon. At 9:59 a.m., the World Trade Center South Tower collapsed. At 10:03 a.m., United Airlines Flight number 93 crashed in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. And at 10:28 a.m., the World Trade Center North Tower collapsed. So if we can just take a moment of silence and remember the survivors as well as those who made the ultimate sacrifice, that would be awesome. Attorney Peter Creticos. He's the president, and I'm sorry, he's not the attorney. He is Peter Creticos. He's the president and executive director of the Institute for Work in the Economy, and he's also a research fellow at the Chaddick Institute for Metropolitan Development at DePaul University in Chicago. He's also a member of the adjunct faculty at the Illinois Institute for Technology Stewart School of Business, and also in the Department of Political Science and Public Administration at Roosevelt University. Peter is currently a member of the Economic Development Committee for the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning, better known as CMAP. He served for 10 years as a director of the Chicago Workforce Investment Board, the Service Delivery Committee, and the Workforce Investment Act Performance Review Subcommittee. He is a former member of the advisory board to ANLACE, which is the community development organization for the Mexican immigrant Little Village neighborhood in Chicago. He also served on the board of the Pilsen Little Village Community Management Organization, which is an affiliate of the Pilsen Little Village Community Mental Health Center, Inc. Peter consults privately as Perils Limited. Peter earned his Ph.D. at the Graduate School at Northwestern University, focusing on a skills-based closeness of fit strategy and job matching at the Department of Industrial Engineering and Management Science at the McCormick School of Engineering and Applied Sciences. He also has a Master of Management degree at Northwestern's Kellogg Graduate School of Management, a Master of Arts in Political Science from the University of Missouri at St. Louis, and a Bachelor of Arts in Philosophy from Washington University in St. Louis. Peter was a Coral Foundation Fellow in St. Louis as well. So thank you so much for joining us today, Peter. Before we get started, can you give us a brief overview of the issues confronting Chicago's workforce and then provide also a brief outlook?
Well, first of all, Valerie, thanks very much for having me on today's show. This is really a pleasure, and a great result of getting to know you through Commissioner Garcia's Commission on Social Innovation, which you serve as a commissioner. Briefly about the workforce, the issues confronting Chicago's workforce. I think there are two that concern me the greatest. One is a concern about the true opportunities that exist for residents of Chicago. And when I say true opportunities, there's a lot of churn that goes on, particularly in terms of lower income jobs. And where I'm troubled, and is part of, in fact, one of the reasons for this conference we're going to be talking about later on, is that the Chicago metropolitan area has not demonstrated the same intensity in growth in innovative businesses that will employ a large group of people in the middle. And the way innovation works is that you need smart people to translate ideas into products and services, and it's that translation piece that sits in the middle of that process, where you really employ good technical workers, middle management, and other people who are accomplished in that process. In Chicago, the metro area has been lagging, I think, other parts of the country in this innovative operation, and we could see it in terms of the fragility and of job growth. Now, there's certainly the other issue is that there is certainly a segment of the population that seems to benefit very greatly from the mix of businesses that we have. And we are attracting a lot of people from outside of Chicago to the region, but it's beginning to create what I call a barbell economy, which is you have a great strength at the very high end in terms of opportunities. You have a lot of jobs at the low end, and nothing connecting, in a very thin bar connecting the two pieces. Frankly, the most glaring example of this is what's happened in Silicon Valley and in the San Francisco Bay Area, where you have a global workforce attracted to San Francisco for a limited number of jobs, and you have a very large workforce that's providing service to the community as a whole. But the pathways from one to the other, from those who live there to those who have to compete really against a global labor market, is a pretty tough pathway.
Mm-hmm. So we're mirroring what's happening out there as well.
We're not there yet, but it's beginning to show signs where you're seeing this kind of bifurcated growth occur, and that is troubling.
Okay. And when you say bifurcated growth, you're talking about growth in two different directions, two silos.
Right.
Okay.
Two silos.
And not really.
Two silos.
Yeah, two silos, and not really in a coordinated fashion. And we're losing out on opportunity, it sounds.
Yeah, I mean it's the middle that counts in many respects, and the middle grows under particular conditions, and the conditions really are tied directly to the strength of innovation in the metro area.
I gotcha.
And we can get into some examples, but maybe that we can leave that for some of the questions down the road.
Okay. All right, that makes sense. So can you give us an overview of the work that you're doing with the Institute for Work and the Economy, and then also, just give us a little background on yourself and how you got started down this path?
Sure. So the Institute was established in 2000. We just celebrated our 17th anniversary. We were originally part of Northern Illinois University's Center for Governmental Studies. But we are also unusual in the sense that we established the Institute as an independent not-for-profit. So we had this entity that was housed within Northern, but also had and continues to have a national board of directors, separate corporate governance, and the like. We established it then and continues to operate as a collaborative. And so our intention was always to keep the staff small, to have as little overhead as we could possibly manage and muster, and still be able to do our work. Excuse me, and then use the Institute as a vehicle to engage others, both people in the academic world, policy wonks, and those sorts of folks, but also practitioners in workforce and economic development on issues of some common interest. So very little of our work is actually a response to requests for proposals. Typically, our work is based on conversations with people in the field, taking stock of what we're hearing, often outgrowths of prior projects. And then we develop both an agenda in terms of what we want to pursue, which is a blend of both research and as well as practice. We sort of straddle the two worlds, and then assemble a team, assemble the resources, and then pursue the project. It can be harrowing in terms of a business plan, but in terms of the activities that we pursue, we really enjoy a lot of freedom and find ourselves often at the cutting edge of issues. How I got into this, it was I had a kind of Illinois is not known for being a state that depends heavily on policy research, but I had the good fortune of very early in my career working for then Senate President Phil Rock. I was with him from 79 to 92, with the exception of a year, which I took off to actually work on the World's Fair, which didn't happen. And Senator Rock was one who had a real keen sense of the politics, but also wanted to be guided by good policy work. And I had the good fortune of being able to work for him, and so I was able to learn something about politics while I was also helping in terms of developing policies on various programs and initiatives here in the state.
Oh, that is awesome. I tell you, I miss politicians like like Senator Rock.
Yeah, we all do, yes.
Oh, changing the subject. I don't want to go too far down that road. You get me started. So we're apparently at a historic point in our nation's history with respect to tropical storms with catastrophic effects. Irma just landed in Florida with Hurricane Jose threatening to come right behind. Houston is still suffering from the effects of Harvey. And I noticed from your website that when Katrina hit New Orleans back in 2005, you as well as other members of the board of the Institute for Work and the Economy, you recommended an asset-based approach to rebuilding, which I thought was interesting. So can you give us a few highlights of your recommendations for Katrina? And I know it might be too soon to say right now, but would you recommend a similar approach for Houston and Florida right now?
Well, actually, as we speak, in the last few days we've been making adjustments to the preamble to the proposal to reflect current conditions, but we're actually trying to figure out how to refloat the idea, no pun intended when it comes to storms, but refloat the idea in terms of how to deal with the destruction and use this as an opportunity to promote job growth, particularly in construction, but not exclusively to that. So the concept was briefly what we were seeing was huge displacement of Katrina, as we were seeing now, particularly from Harvey, and what we're expecting from Irma. And from that displacement, people out of their homes, out of their jobs, look at this as a way in which we can engage people in their own reconstruction, the reconstruction of their communities, and do so in a sensible way that supported that gives them credentialed skills in the process, so that this it enables them to be able to build careers off of the skills that they're learning to restore their communities. Again, it's not just in construction, but also in healthcare and a variety of other areas too. And we used some of the models we had in mind. One was actually an idea that was successfully implemented in Alaska by one of my board members to engage Alaska Natives. These are indigenous people from Alaska in the construction industry. They had been locked out effectively during the pipeline. Created it was a huge lost opportunity in terms of jobs for Alaska Natives, and created enormous resentment within towards unions in particular, but towards the construction companies in general. And what they did was they worked with the native corporations up there. My board member did, and developed this program in building maintenance and repair, where people were essentially getting a credential in being capable of multiple doing tasks in multiple trades: plumbing, carpentry, electrical work, and so forth. And then this was then articulated into the trades themselves, so the time you would spend on plumbing could count towards your plumbing apprenticeship as well. The native corporations would employ these people in their own schools and hospitals and so forth, but it was also a pathway into the construction industry, and so it was a win-win proposition. But it was also one that created a lot of it was rapid fire. So you get into this thing and you would learn these skills quickly, be credentialed along the way, and be employed right away. And so that was that's an example of the kind of thing that we had in mind when we were talking about the Katrina response then, and what we're thinking about reproposing with respect to Harvey and Irma and the like.
Okay. Awesome, awesome. All right. I want to remind our listening audience that you're listening to Nonprofit U, and we're speaking with Peter Creticos, the President and Executive Director of the Institute for Work and the Economy. We'll be taking questions from our listening audience, and not our chat room today, but on Facebook. If you have our Facebook page and you have liked it, you're free to comment. So we'll be taking comments on Facebook as well as by phone at about the 30-minute mark. And the call-in number is 347-884-8121. Again, that number is 347-884-8121. So, Peter, the Institute for Work and the Economy has a conference coming up, and I found the theme to be very intriguing, the many futures of work, possibilities, and perils. Can you tell us when the conference is, where it'll take place, how it came about, and all that good stuff?
Sure. So the conference is occurring on October 5th and 6th. It's here in Chicago. It's a little bit of an unusual space because it's a sort of a hidden conference center, but Northwestern Medical Center actually has a very large conference center, and
Wow.
so we were able to secure that for this particular conference. Thanks to, frankly, the head of government affairs there, Rob Christie, who helped us in making this thing work. The conference actually got its origins more than 15 years ago, frankly, and it was because of our own frustration at the time. We were seeing, we tried, a dozen years ago, 15 years ago, like I said, to get foundations engaged in the issue of the loss of middle-income jobs and the loss of the middle class, and we couldn't get people to pay attention to it. We saw it as an issue emerging, frankly, from some other work we were doing on immigration and integrating immigrants into the workforce, and couldn't make sense as to why immigrants were being scapegoated in places where, frankly, there were no immigrants in that part of the country. And we realized that it was, people in the middle feeling that their existence was being threatened by a variety of things, not just immigrants, by globalization, by foreign trade, by offshoring and outsourcing and so forth. But immigrants were convenient, and our sense was that we should try to help bring about some conversations around these issues by both figuring out a way in which we can help inform people about what the challenges are, but also by introducing ways in which people can express themselves effectively. And we call it the kitchen table forum, with the idea of having the kitchen table conversation about these kinds of issues. And we saw that as sort of our target. We couldn't get any funding for it. The response we got from the foundation community was, what are you talking about? We're trying to move people out of poverty. Our response was, well, where are you going to put them? Because where you want to put them is an area where we're seeing decline. But so we fast forward to today. There's been a number of conferences on the future of work. Myself and my board were frustrated again by the fact that most of these conferences seem to be focusing on, quote, the gig economy, this new age version of people working off electronic platforms, when really ignoring a whole constellation of issues in terms of questioning whether what's driving these changes in the first place, and the structure of work, and why, how are people responding to it. And then, frankly, the reason why we use the plural futures in the title of the conference, completely ignoring questions of race, gender, age, disability, prior involvement with the criminal justice system, immigration. None of those issues get talked about when people talk about the future of work, and so we thought that they can't be ignored. It really does depend on, in large measure, who you are and where you start. And And so, excuse me, we wanted to introduce that as part of the conversation as well. So that was the motivation, and that's been our, sort of what's been driving us along this whole pathway.
Okay. This is very exciting, and I'm wondering, can you share with our listening audience who some of the speakers will be for your plenary sessions, and then what they can expect once they attend those sessions?
Yeah, sure. So the conference is actually divided into two different sets of activities.
Mm-hmm.
The plenary sessions are really designed to sort of set the stage and the tone of the conference. And then most of the time is going to be spent actually by people in working groups. So the plenary session is to sort of kick it off. We start out with Peter Creticos, who's a self-described capitalist, and has been somebody who's been arguing for several years now that what's going to kill capitalism is shareholder value strategies, companies that are short-term in their thinking and distribute their assets to their shareholders rather than reinvest. And that's what's killing off the middle class in those jobs. And so it's unusual for somebody who comes out of Young and Rubicon, which is the premier global marketing firm, to be out there. He's retired and to be out there speaking about this. We also have Max Neufind, who's a special advisor to the German Ministry of Labor. And Germany's been doing some really interesting things in sort of looking what's going to happen as a result of what they call the Fourth Industrial Revolution, and what's the consequence going to be on workers. And so they've organized this initiative called Work 4.0. Max has been involved with this, and although a lot, when you get into the details, Germany doesn't translate well to the United States. The way they have framed the issues is very relevant to the United States as an advanced economy with many of the same challenges as we have. So the broader questions and the broader issues that they've raised are very relevant to people here in terms of policies and practices. And then he's followed by two individuals, Saru Jayaraman, who has been organizing restaurant workers since 2001. When as a result of actually the tragedy that happened on September 11th, when you had a lot of unemployed workers who used to work at Windows to the World, the restaurant at the top of the Trade Center. And so she's been organizing restaurant workers. She founded Restaurant Opportunities United and has been organizing restaurant workers since. And so she's going to be talking about her work. And she will be with Sandy Darity, who's a professor at Duke, and who's most recently been writing a lot about guaranteed jobs. And and then finally, we're announcing a new speaker today. At lunch, we have it on an agenda that lunch we have Dee Davis, who's from the Center for Rural Strategies, so we can bring in some of the issues of what's been going on in rural America. But then on Friday, and our only speaker on Friday so far is Charles Adler, who lives here in Chicago, started a makerspace called Lost Arts. It's a makerspace that supports the arts community and the creative community, but also he co-founded Kickstarter, and so Charles just today agreed that he would be speaking on the 6th, October 6th. So that's our lineup of speakers.
Wow, that's really exciting stuff. And what I love most about this conference is, as you say, it's not your typical conference where guests sit quietly and watch an endless line of speakers and mind-numbing panels. Instead, it's a series of working sessions, and you already touched on that, informed by subject matter experts designed to crowdsource our collective knowledge and create real solutions that grow the middle, promote innovation, and tear down barriers to economic security. Again, I know you started touching on it before, but can you be a little bit more specific when you share with us an
Sure.
overview of the workshops?
So we have 6 working groups. Each working group I've commissioned papers from not just academics but also practitioners. These papers are now being published as we review them. Actually, we don't approve them, but when we review them, and they're going up on the conference website, which, by the way, is futuresofwork.org. That's futures with plural of work.org. And so those are being published. These people will also be part of the conversation. But the real talent, the real knowledge, it's going to be is comprised of the folks who attend the conference as participants. And so we're doing a massive outreach to grassroots workers and academics and policymakers and so forth, business and organized labor to be part of these working groups. So like I said, there's 6. One's going to be on innovative enterprise. The second is on restoring the middle, as in middle class. The third is on structural racism. The fourth will be addressing gender inequity, disability, age, prior involvement with incarceration, or criminal justice systems, excuse me. The fifth is going to be on the on-demand economy and the commodification of workers and skills. And we specifically in this one did not say gig economy because the on-demand economy has been with us for forever. I mean, you're talking about day laborers. More recently, you're talking about people who have to, who are essentially on call all the time, never know their work schedules, but they're on demand at the behest of their employer, or people who are working several part-time jobs to be able to, work out a full-time career. So there's many permutations in addition to just simply the people who are working off of electronic platforms or Uber drivers and so forth. Mm-hmm. And then the last one is sort of my baby, and it's on economic justice. We have been in a lot of conferences where we spend a lot of time talking facts and figures, and we don't talk about justice. And so we wanted to have at least one working group focusing on that. Although, frankly, they all overlap. So nothing's exclusive to any particular working group.
I think this is a really, really interesting approach. Rarely do you try to mix, or do I hear of people trying to mix two worlds, the worlds of capitalists and what we would call the socialists. And we use socialism as a bad word, and I don't mean it that way. I really like the approach of looking at the positive aspects of capitalism and how it can work for the masses, for lack of a better word. So sure. I congratulate you on doing that.
Well, we hope we can pull it off, but I think it's we've been so far really fortunate in terms of the talent that we've amassed on the subject matter expert side, and the registrations are beginning to show that we're getting pretty good traction with especially folks who work at the grassroots level. We're also getting some policy level folks, as well as actually a few foundations are coming to be part of this conference. Foundations that aren't funding us, but foundations that are interested in these issues. So it's looking like we're getting the kind of mix that we were hoping for.
Okay, awesome. Okay, I would like to remind our listening audience that you're listening to Nonprofit U, and today's guest is Peter Creticos. He's the president of the Institute for Work in the Economy. We'll be taking questions and comments from our listeners right about now. Our comments are being taken on our Facebook page as we're having issues with our chat room, but feel free to call in. The number is 347-884-8121. You can also post comments, again, on Facebook. You can post comments on Twitter. In addition to questions for Peter, we'll be really, really interested in hearing some of your experiences with working as a social entrepreneur who is also doing workforce development and looking at ways that you have personally or professionally built upon some strategies that would employ people in the middle. And before we get back into our discussion with Peter, I wanted to share a little bit of information with you about my upcoming compliance challenge. In my practice with nonprofit organizations, I find that all roads, regardless of whether or not I'm working with strategic planning, board development, startup, grant writing, whatever, all roads come back to compliance. About 40% of our organizations in Chicago have lost their tax-exempt status between 2010 and 2017 because they failed to file Form 990 for 3 years in a row. I'll be hosting a 30-day compliance challenge, a series of 4 webinars to show nonprofit leaders how to maintain their tax-exempt status and what to do if they lose it. And the goal is to work with organizations to bring them current on all their paperwork within 30 days of completing the series, especially as we get prepared for Giving Tuesday. And as you know, Giving Tuesday is right after Black Friday. It's November 28th this year. So if you're interested, give me a call at 773-571-3886 or email me at consulting@valeriefleonard.com. Again, you can email me at consulting@valeriefleonard.com for further information. Okay, so Peter, getting back to the subject at hand, what will be the end product of the conference and how will those results be used?
Sure. So we're going to have 2 sets of products, not exclusive of each other. They build off each other. And then hopefully we follow up with some next steps after that. But the one is that these papers I think are going to form a really good backbone of ideas and information, covering the 6 major discussion areas. And so our expectation is that those will finally end up in a book. So the each paper will in effect be a chapter within the book. And people who attend the conference actually will help contribute to the quality of those papers, because my expectation is that what gets published on our website is going to be different than what ends up in the book, because the authors will go back and rework some of these ideas based on some of the feedback that they've heard at the conference itself. The second is we're obligated. So we have 5 major funding organizations behind this conference so far: MacArthur Foundation, the Annie Casey Foundation, the Kauffman Foundation, and the Chicagoland Alliance, Funders Alliance for Workforce Development. Those are the general funders to the conference. The Ford Foundation has also provided us resources to support scholarships for grassroots people who work at the grassroots effectively, or who otherwise find that the registration fee is unaffordable. Now we've set the registration at a level which is $290 that we think is affordable for most organizations, but as we all know, Illinois has gone through this horrendous 2-year period without budgets. Social service organizations have been extremely hit extremely hard, and even those that have managed to navigate their way through, I think, frankly, just the shock of this whole last 2 years have made organizations really reluctant to even part with a modest registration fee. So we've tried hard to make a lot of accommodations to Illinois groups to be part of this. Although this is a national conference, and we have been giving some scholarships and other support to people from other parts of the country as well. but we've been particularly attentive to Illinois. So our hope is that from this we will get, the aim is that these working groups will come up with ideas and recommendations, and I'm expecting that we're going to have some pretty creative ideas coming out of this. I've seen this in the past where you start to ask people who get their hands dirty and work, directly with others in terms of dealing with problems at the street level. You get some pretty creative solutions, and a lot of those get filtered out before they get to the policymakers. And so what we're hoping to see and expect to see is some pretty creative ideas coming out of these working groups. And so we're obligated to the foundations to and then our hope is to actually take this on the road and to do these events, but on a much smaller scale in places around the country. To continue to get new ideas.
Were you ever a community organizer?
No, but
you definitely have that approach. I love it.
Well, yeah, when I was in high school, I went to New Trier West, which isn't exactly what you would consider to be the most progressive place in the world, but we had something. There was a very heavy emphasis on social service at New Trier, believe it or not, and we were blessed in having some people who really got us out of our little cocoon. And so I actually, when I was growing up, in high school, I was doing tutoring in West Garfield Park. In fact, that's where I first met Mary Nelson, and she still remembers me.
Oh, wow.
As a high schooler, I was, we were out there every Saturday, and so I got to, appreciate that there was a world outside of Wilmette. And so that was really where I sort of started to get my sensibilities about these issues.
Well, I'm glad you kept your sensibilities in spite of all of your wonderful experiences. It's great for Cook County. It's great for Chicago and beyond. So thank you.
No, it's and then we both talked about Phil Rock. Working for him, you can't.
Right.
You can't live in a soundproof shell working for him. So
that is so true. And then you know what? Another thing that I really love about this conference is the fact that you're building capacity at every point along the critical path of the conference. That's all the way from, I guess, even considering registration to registration and participation and beyond. So for example, if you go to your conference website, I noticed that you can download a number of resources that can help you prepare for the discussions. And even if you don't go, and I'm not dissuading people from going because I really think it's a golden opportunity, but even if you don't go, if you read these resources, you will gain a lot of information. So can you give us an overview of what they can expect to find once they go to the website and download the resources?
So we will have the backbone are going to be the working papers, but we also have a place where people can send me items to be posted on our blog. We have a blog. And the only moderating I'm going to do is to, keep it clean. But, I'm not going to edit for content in the sense that, I may agree or disagree. It doesn't make any difference. It's a way of getting ideas on the table. For those who attend the conference, we will have an app that they can download for their smartphone, and it's something that I actually was introduced to earlier this year. I attended a conference with the Kauffman Foundation, and it's the first time I've ever found a conference app that I really liked. And what it will do is it will stay alive for a year. It's designed to promote community of practice. So there's a lot of internal communication devices that people can be in touch with each other. Also, they'll be able to download resources again through the app, including the papers, and then also when we finish the conference, the recommendations. So our hope is that it will continue to feed the conversation. And in fact, this event that I attended with the Kauffman Foundation, that's exactly what's happened. I mean, I continue to receive notices through the app about different follow-on activities that come from the conference. Those are going to be the principal areas. And then as we hopefully, again, move down the path, and we have not developed funding on this, we do want to take this show on the road and to go to other parts of the country and also other parts of Chicago and the metropolitan area and engage people in the same sort of conversations, but they can build off of what we've already talked about at the conference itself. So it's intentional in that way.
Go ahead.
No, that's
really good. Yeah, now I would assume that as you take your show on the road, some of the stops will be with the policymakers, the people who actually design programs that they expect to be implemented on the ground. Is that true? Yeah.
Yeah, but we're also really trying to get them to focus and asking different questions. And so, for instance, there is not, if anybody was thinking this through, there is not a working group on technology, and that's very deliberate because technology is a tool, and it's the application of technology through policies and practices that make differences in terms of what happens to people. And so, but there's an inordinate amount of attention that's been focused on technology itself as somehow magically creating either bad environments or good environments for workers. And so when policymakers focus on technology, they're focusing on the wrong question. In addition, we really are challenging notions about what's driving the changes in the workplace. And to simply say, well, that's just the way business isn't good enough. There are businesses that have been very effective at including, those businesses that reinvest in R&D are the businesses that tend to really really value their workers in ways that go simply beyond production. It goes into the actual act of innovation, and so they rely on those workers to be able to be more than just cogs in a wheel. But there are other businesses that are looking to extract as much as they can in terms of price and cost, so as to be able to, to be the low-cost producer and earn profits that way. And that has a very different effect in terms of the workers, because those are the jobs that tend to be replaced. Those workers tend to be replaced by either machines or by lower-cost workers in other parts of the globe. So, but it isn't enough to simply say, well, that's the way it is, and we're going to train people to meet those expectations. I think it's perfectly appropriate to have a feedback loop back to the business community and says, these aren't things that we're going to pull out public resources to support you on, as an example.
Yeah, I like. Now, going back to the fact that you're going to be accepting articles for your blog prior to the conference, do you have any criteria? I know that you said that you weren't going to censor what's written, but are there any very loose or even other stringent criteria that you're
No,
looking for?
other than pertains to the major themes in the conference itself.
Okay.
So if the themes are out there, they're explained. If people want to, I have a blog that I put there to sort of launch it. It was sort of my vision about what we were going to be doing with this conference. But the idea is that we're inviting people to be able to get into the conversations that we're going to be having anyway in the discussion groups by offering ideas or thoughts that pertain to the 6 major themes. That's really the only criterion.
Okay. And then as we wind up, I'm just
not even
wondering,
linked, by the way.
Oh, okay, awesome. So as we wind down and we look at the output of the conference, how do you expect this work to impact the overall agenda of the Institute going forward?
A couple of ways. One, one is hopefully we do some additional follow-on. I think that's part of it. But second, we are, each one of those thematic areas can produce a whole series of projects. And part of this is to be able to look and say, okay, now where do we fit well with this? I mean, for example, we're already talking with a group of states, the National Governors Association, to do a project on the on-demand economy. And so we're hoping that several states would come to this conference. I think we have 3 right now outside of Illinois that are part of that discussion that are also coming to the conference. And so the sense here is that this would help hone what we want to do together. So there have been, and I'm expecting that there'll be some other opportunities to come out of this as well, in the same way. But mostly what we're hoping to do is to influence the decision makers on how they characterize the issues in the first place.
And I think that's refreshing. We definitely could use some innovative approaches to, the way they look at the problems and then the way they roll out programs and policies that will impact the issue. It's just been my observation that all too often our policymakers, sit in ivory towers. They have wonderful policy ideas, but many of the solutions don't really drill down to the grassroots level, especially for communities like in North Lawndale, because there's so many challenges, and the work that needs to be done, you don't really see the impact in 2 to 4 year spurts, where the politicians are probably most sensitive.
Well, yeah, I mean, unfortunately, I mean, I think part of this is just the language of campaigns, and they set up unreasonable expectations, and politicians buy into it too. But then you look at the work of let's say Mayor Riley down in Charleston, who just recently retired as mayor after more than a couple of decades as mayor of that city. My dad grew up in Charleston, South Carolina. I used to go to Charleston as a kid, every other summer, and I remember it as a backwater. I remember it as a backwater, it was a Navy town, and you get a tattoo better than a meal. But the thing that so now you see it today, and you see this as this beautiful jewel on the southeast coast, with a very progressive, as a result of more than a couple of decades of a very progressive mayor. Now, has it been totally inclusive? Absolutely not. I mean, you have still serious divisions, economic, racial, and so forth there. But he took the long view, and he was able to move a city in ways that very few other southern cities have been able to move, and it has become better. It's not the best, but it has become better. and that requires a long view, and it doesn't work on the 2-year or 4-year cycle time. And he was fortunate in being reelected a lot. I mean, that's just simply one example, and there are others across the country. But voters' expectations are, what have you done for us lately, and that's drummed into people's heads through campaigns. The classic here in Chicago is, the extraordinary violence that's occurred in communities across the city, and the simplistic approaches, or the simple answer everybody's looking for is, or a lot of people talk about, are more police. Well, police are part of the solution, but it's also education, it's investment, it's job creation, and it's a comprehensive package that takes a lot of moving pieces have to come together, and those don't happen overnight.
Right.
They take a lot of time. I mean, Valerie, you do this work all the time. You know this. I mean, it's not simple, and it's not only one thing. It's several things that have to work together.
And then on that note, yeah, you've done an awful lot, a lot of work in this area, clearly since you were a youth in a lot of different arenas, and you've had various experiences. What would you say are the top 3 lessons that you've learned and you continue to learn? And it may not even be anything new, just maybe different ways of looking at age-old problems.
Oh, well, one is I'm always wrong. Well, let's put it this way: I'm always partly right. That's a big thing. You have to be humble in this business. At the same time, you have to have enough of an ego so you can take the bruising. The second is one that I kind of ran into when I was giving a speech a few years ago, and I was walking through all sorts of ideas that I've been part of, and every one of them, as I was walking through them, I realized it didn't work, and so.
Wow.
About halfway through, I said, maybe I should just start a website called Noble Failures, because the idea behind that is what have you learned from what didn't work, and so it's partly I'm not always right, but also it's the constructive use of being wrong, frankly, that makes a huge difference. And the third thing is that it's always a collaboration. I mean, it's never done something, you don't do it by yourself. We built the Institute as a collaboration. It's functioned as such. We've benefited from it. It's been a slog when it comes to being able to sustain it over time. But it always has to involve a collection of people. It's not one thing or one person.
Mm-hmm. It's excellent. Those are words to live by.
So, well, yep.
So we've come to the end of our show, and I'd like to thank Peter Creticos for being my guest today. Peter, before we go, would you care to share any thoughts and tell our listening audience, 1, how they can register for the conference, and then 2, how they might get involved with your ongoing work at the Institute?
Well, registering for the conference, go to futuresofwork.org, www.futuresofwork.org. You have all the information about the conference there, plus there's a link into the registration. If you feel, now we have limited funds, so I can't promise everybody who's going to write to say that we've got scholarship money, but if you feel that the 290 is impossible reach, you can contact me through the website. I always respond to emails, so you can be assured that that I will get back to you on that, and we can see what we can work out. In terms of the events themselves, the conference website was professionally done. Our own website, which is www.institute.org, workandeconomy.org. That's workandeconomy.org, which is the Institute's website. Isn't so professionally done, but it is a good resource. We've what we did try to do with it is make sure that everything that we've done is downloadable and it's publishable, and we don't have any copyright restrictions on it. You're welcome to use those materials if you find that you have some additional questions. Again, you can get back to me through there's my email is listed in the website. So those are the easiest ways to sort of stay in touch with what we're up to.
Okay, awesome. Thanks again. And I'd like to thank everyone in the listening audience for listening to Nonprofit View Blog Radio Talk Show today. The show today will be available for download within about an hour. And make sure that you tune in next week when our guests will be Mike Paligucci and Carlos Luna. They're from Chicago Veterans, and we're going to talk to them about issues that impact veterans, some of the resources that are available for them, and most importantly, opportunities for innovation and business ownership for veterans. So until then, I hope you have a wonderful and productive week, and I will see you next week. And thanks again, Peter. Take care.
Thank you. Okay. Bye-bye.
Get to Old Navy today only. Great gifts like blankets and slippers for the family are just $5, and Adora boots for women, girls, and toddler girls are just $12. Hurry, it ends tonight at Old Navy. Valid 12/14, excludes boys, select styles, in stores only.
Wow, nice haul.
Told ya, Macy's Backstage has perfect last-minute gifts.
With prices so low, you never need a coupon.
I scored the perfect makeup palette.
Super cute. I grabbed these cool drones for the guys.
Nice. Here's a handbag for Aunt Helen.
Found awesome toys for the kids.
Cookware for the budding chef.
Oh, and look what I got for Uncle Hank.
A puppy chew toy?
No, that's for Rex. They even have gifts for pets.
Well, you know Uncle Hank. He'd love anything we gave him.
Macy's Backstage. Savings for everyday life. Details at macy'sbackstage.com.